Good viewer, you are watching Xirtus.
Hello. Welcome to the Xirtus.
Synctank.
Oh yeah? Oh yeah? You like the Synctank? You like to watch the Synctank? Hey, look at that! American Time Machine. That's just crazy. I didn't see that coming. So now there's just this is a lack of symmetry, and I'm all about asymmetry. This is a minus David, a plus extra zero with a Shagsworth, which is what I call like the ultimate synchronicity challenge. Did you guys know that if you spoke Japanese more often, you probably would like not need to get any sort of medical treatment against COVID, apparently, according to this one Japanese guy, allegedly. So they did this test. This is a pen. There's not actually a pen, but this is a guy saying this is a pen. And they show, it's amazing. Like when you say the word pen, look at this. You can see where this is going. They actually got a lady to breathe by saying this is a pen. And it was incredible because when she said this is a pen in Japanese, I mean, the napkin barely moved, obviously. It was just so graceful because Japanese is such a civilized language. But when she said this is a pen, boom, look at that. Pen, just across.
Now, I have a big question out the gate.
Fair enough.
Do we know if Jeff Dunham, the famous ventriloquist comedian, contracted COVID?
Oh, man. This is really interesting.
If you can throw your voice, are you less susceptible to disease?
Quarantined, isolated through maybe he at least has a special about it, but I imagine that he probably made the special when he was feeling well.
I feel extra bad now for every time I went and got pizza during COVID that I would get the pepperoni with extra pepperoncinis. I was probably just killing like entire families by doing
whole
that.
Families. Oh my god, that's just horrible. I can't believe you did that. I don't know. So yeah, basically there's that. Do you think there's any truth to that, or is that crazy?
I get pineapples, pepperonis, jalapenos.
Oh my god, you just went full Matrix.
Whoa.
I heard pineapples somewhere in there.
Check.
It's the first day of school for a lot of people because the socialists had Labor Day on Monday. Do you guys have kids? You guys have kids that go to school? What do you guys think
Yes.
about the school? Do you send your kids in body armor? Like, what do you do to keep them safe these days?
I live in a pretty small neighborhood. My kids, I don't know. I like to think my neighborhood's super safe. There's like 3 houses on this road that have flags that say like, come and take it, you know, on it. So I'm like, I feel good. Something happens. Someone's strapped and they're not getting away.
It's pretty based.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like school is kind of weird these days because you don't know what's going to happen in the schools,
Yeah.
and they don't teach them things they need to know about, like Gundam, which this is the timeline for the complete metaverse of Gundam. And I was thinking a lot about Gundam because of Extra Zero. Extra Zero, you want to explain the reference real quick, like because we got.
Well, as far as where my name comes from, or
it literally is. It's a Gundam reference.
Yeah. So mine is from I believe it's from the Universal Century timeline, but it's from a Waith MS team. And that's kind of the main timeline, and there's a it's a more intimate story, and essentially it's one of the RX 782s that gets rebuilt into the EZ8 Custom, which the EZ stands for Extra Zero. And I just loved it because it was a hardcore Gundam that actually rips its own arm off to beat the shit out of a Golf Custom, which
So like Gundams, for people that don't understand it, it's like it's Japanese, it's a cartoon, it's in space, they're robots. It's a Japanese space cartoon about robots that fight. And it's also the timeline thing is that there are resets to their civilizations that are happening rather often. And most people forget the entire history between civilizations, except for in the Principality of Xeon. Which, look at that flag for a second, because it seems like a parody of another flag.
But it's not.
No. It just seems like it is. But they're also run by the Zabi family, who are able to exist in all times and run all the banks and remember all the history between reset civilizations while everyone else goes into the Dark Ages. And then they build space robots every 200 years that require all of the world's resources and then destroy the world's resources and start again. And they're nothing like the red shield behind them that is their logo, right? The Zubi family are like the... Right? It's like a whole show about the Rothschilds controlling reset civilization. Not just a show. It's like 30 shows.
If you tell me that the Rothschilds have mech suits, they might actually go from like the bad guys to the good guys in my little Rolodex here.
I feel like that's kind of a fair response. What do you think about this idea, though?
Man, if we start seeing like mechs shoot out of like the banks, like you're going in, you see like Chase Tower, and then.
Did you guys ever see that movie, the Canadian movie about G Savior? It's a Gundam Savior, right? It's G Savior. It's a live action movie made in Canada that is about. I mean, it's the craziest movie, right? Savior.
I started watching this. Yeah.
So basically, it's about the Gundam are fighting the Illuminati, and it's about like the settlements of the new human settlements of consent, which is they're in the midst of a global food shortage, which is controlled by the Zubi family, who are running the Illuminati. Like they just went all out with it. Like this is the norm. This is the actual plot of Gundam.
Do you watch? Xirtus, do you watch this? Do you watch Gundam at all? Gundam
I do. I like Gundam. Do you like Gundam Seed? Is that weird?
When you phrase it like that, it sounds weird.
You're making it weird.
I liked Gundam in the 2000s, and I think a lot of people didn't, and I think that it was kind of cool.
I think Wing was everybody's entry point.
Yeah, Gundam Wing was where that's the only one that I've watched, and I really liked a lot.
I like G Gundam a lot, too. Which was basically just like a tournament fighting show, and it was far less serious. I think a lot of people didn't like it because it didn't have any it didn't have as much political intrigue as it did. It was very accessible though.
See, that makes you like wonder like what is the deal, because it wasn't even a popular show like Mobile Suit Gundam, the original in like the 80s, wasn't that popular show, and they had to push it.
I know the history.
Yeah. Okay.
It was great. The model kits. The model kits. Like that was a series where the toys, the Bandai model kits actually became more popular than the source material, and then people bought into the source material because they fell in love with building these, and they were at the time inexpensive, and I think they still pretty much are inexpensive compared to other high end figures and collectibles. And I should channel Michael Mercy. He did a video about it, and basically how like the pre-made figures actually. We're not taking off, but those last ditch kits that they put out took off, and they couldn't keep them stocked.
I like when things work backward like that.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. Like, I don't think it happens often, but it's cool when you have that sort of thing.
And if you want to see something really insane, look up one of the perfect grade kits, because you build it right down to like the skeleton, the optics. You have to wire LEDs.
Oh.
Yeah, they're.
Oh my god.
They're hardcore.
That's pretty insane.
And for like the RX 78, like you can actually do two variations. Like you can actually pull it apart and get the core fighter to actually come out of the center. It's nuts. Even the pilots are in there. You paint the pilots.
Japanese building real Gundam, right? Like I've heard that
Mhm.
there's actually, so this is something I find kind of interesting about this Japanese ideology, because you have this sort of idea that Japan, Japan didn't really surrender their katanas. They didn't do a proper surrender in World War II. Like they didn't do the things that the Japanese would normally do, surrendering their samurai's katanas, bowing to the proper flag, all these things that they were supposed to do. So it's almost like Japan didn't really lose the war. I mean, maybe even if they did, ideologically, that's something Shinzo Abe was all about. Let's rebuild the military.
Rest in
the
peace.
Yeah, right. But in the 50s too, before and like during this time, there's been all of this psychological ideology of Japan about building, like Super Sentai, the Power Rangers show is about the world finally realizing that they cannot defeat the ultimate evils, both exterior and interior to ourselves, because a lot of the Power Ranger stuff is like about dietitian issues too, but without the help of the Japanese. And the Japanese are finally like apologized to and asked to be the world rangers that are going to protect the world from outside and itself, right? So I mean, it's constantly about they need to build this technology, and they're helping the world with this humanitarian aid after World War II until they get to the point where they have to run things again, right? Isn't that kind of what do you
Give or take, and then you have Kamen Rider spun into the mix, and
Kamen Rider's cool because it's like,
Yeah.
oh, your parents got you the newest uniform. Good. Do you know how? Did you read the manual? Because did you know? Because that's all. It's all about
Yeah.
knowing how to use everything and knowing exactly what you're going to do. Which I think is also about like being educated in the technology or the equipment that they're wanting you to have. So Japan is, I don't know. It's also scary because Japan's whole population has changed.
Mm.
They've got what 10% immigration in the last few years, like
Yeah.
1 million Koreans and 1 million Filipinos coming for doing like labor and work, and like kids aren't being born. So like, what do you see in the future of Japan, right? Like,
It's an interesting question. Like, how do they course correct because it's funny. You talked a lot about technology, and one of the things that I see where they're you know they're challenged with declining birth rates is the fact that they have pornography, they have electronic stimulation, they have young men aren't interested in having formal relationships because they can have virtual ones. And I think it's interesting that Japan has been this center of technology and this big tech hub that's embraced it, that's made it part of their culture.
like anti-Amish, yeah.
Yeah, like Japan is well known for being ahead of the curve, and there's that meme, Japan's living in 2050. But I think Japan also tells you that like they kind of help expose some of the dangers of rampant technology and expansion, and having it be too much of an integrated part of your
Japan's
culture.
like regressed in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Like
Mhm.
Japan still
Well, they
uses
can fix
fax
it.
machines. They just made a law that they had to stop using faxes. All right, sorry, Thomas.
I was just saying Japan can easily fix the problem. The only real big downside is they got to give up the monoculture. Like all they got to do is just start importing other people from other cultures and then just destroy.
No, they don't. All they have
everything
to
that
do
we
is
know Japan
import.
stands
All they have
for.
to do is import what they call weeboos or Toys. Like, I'm just saying, all over the world, there are people that have only watched anime. They were alone in their house, and their parents were like, "Don't go out there; it's dangerous." There are people ready, to come to Japan.
Isn't it funny though? I was listening to I forget who was his guest, but they were talking to Rogan was talking about AI and how if AI does destroy us, it's not going to be through dropping bombs on us. They're going to do basically what Japan has done is basically digitally castrate men, and so like birth rates they'll just go through the floor because there's no reason to leave your house. There's no reason to engage in like actual discourse with people face to face. I just go online and create this relationship with a fake person, and it would just in that way we would just kind of fall apart. We wouldn't know how to go outside anymore.
What do you think,
Almost,
Thomas?
you basically turn into
It
what's
sounds
it called?
great. I'm for
Wally.
all this.
Yeah.
For it? What do you mean? Don't you think you also talk to humans anyway? Like, what is it? Like, you actually? How do you mean you're for it? What do you mean by that?
Have you met real humans in meat space?
In meat space.
It's true, man. A lot of humans. It's nice to have like the digital approximation.
I'm just excited that it's going to be way better than what Demolition Man made it seem like it was going to be. Like Demolition Man like stopped once the Oculus Rift came out, and they were like, "Oh, that's the peak of human civilization." But I think we're going to get way closer to Minority Report, which is cool. except for the little spider things that come in like laser your eyeballs out. But if you ignore those parts and like the rampant corruption and everything, it actually seems like it could be somewhat livable.
I think it's interesting to think about a world where you don't have to do things for yourself or each other. And that's a big part of relationships. So, food's provided by the Star Trek,
the replicator.
Right? So you don't need to worry about making food for each other. You don't have to worry about finding food. You don't have to worry about working to get food. Having pods just in every city or in any town, and you just get in a train. It takes you from one pod to another pod to another pod. Work in a pod, sleep in a pod, eat in a pod, poo in a pod. Like that. I mean, you don't need to care about it. You know what I mean? Like you stop caring about
Commit suicide in a pod.
It's all white.
That's happened. That's
all these
the
white
thing.
blankets. The white blankets. Exactly.
You hit the wrong button on accident.
So
Why did they put that next to the food button?
Was it Sweden that did it? That has the suicide pods?
I think they do. I think Canada didn't. Canada. I don't know for
Well,
sure.
Canada has made.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Made in Canada, man. Like we made in USA. They've made in Canada is like, oh, so defeatist.
That's like such a Soylent Green thing when you say it out loud, isn't it? Like made in Canada, made in America.
Yeah, that's a literal sync. I don't know. I don't know if there's more like to think about in terms of just I just wanted to harp on this point though for last second before I close on my windows about it. That Gundam is clearly about a civilization history being controlled in the hands of an elite family that reset it every few generations. Okay, good.
Yeah. You should definitely check out Zeta Gundam though, because that's about nuclear holocaust. That's a very interesting anime.
Zeta Gundam. Mountain Dew has a new Mountain Dew. I mean, Taco Bell has a Mountain Dew Slurpee, and I'm scared.
Oh my god.
So Zeta
Usually
Gundam,
when Mountain Dew releases a new anything, that's taken as some kind of a prophecy or something. Like Hawaii, I think, is gone now that Mountain Dew's done this.
yeah,
I think the world ends when they release a when they release a Diet Code Red.
Oh god. I can see it though. I mean, I think you're maybe right that there could be like a Frosty Dew, like some sort of a direct energy weapon that makes everything cold. What about Zeta? Zeta seems cool.
Yeah, so Zeta centers around like there's a nuclear holocaust that happens in it. So definitely, if you've never seen it, check it out.
Brutal. Okay.
Yeah, I feel like you guys are helping sell me a little bit just from the because when I grew up, I only had 3 versions of Gundam, and none of them were Gundam. It was basically like Voltron, Armored Core, and Robot Jocks.
Funny factoid about Voltron is that we got Voltron on accident.
Really?
Yeah, the studio executives ordered a specific anime with and they just said, I want the one with the lions, and they accidentally got they got Go Lion instead of the one that it wasn't Dairuger. Dairuger was what vehicle Voltron was, but there was they ordered they got the wrong anime by mistake, and then also everything is heavily chopped up and edited in that show.
I actually found a couple Voltrons, like Voltron 1, 2, and 3. It was like a mini run that they did in my one of my short boxes this past weekend. I'm pretty stoked.
I really liked Knights of the Zodiac. Did you guys see that one?
Oh yeah.
No.
Knights of the Zodiac. I'm trying to find like the original looking one, but they're all wrong here. Anime 80s. There you go. It's like kind of crazy. It's like this weird. There's like these star children at the like deserted ruins of this Atlantis planet kind of thing that are right at the center of all of the 12 zodiacs, and then they end up with all the powers. Seems like really weird and occult. I like that about the anime. Anime seems to go so far into the occult. It's crazy.
Yeah, so Future Robot Dalatonius was the anime that they wanted to order, but they got Go Lion by mistake and they ran with it.
Future Robot Dalatonius.
Yeah.
I have not seen this. So it's a robot and a lion?
Well, it's still a combining robot.
Yeah. I mean, it looks like that. Seems like a pretty based one. I don't know if I can find more about that.
That one's got more of like a Templar flair to it.
Yeah.
Dude. So, I know like Nausicaa was financed by Prince Bernhardt who also helped finance the first Gundam. So like Burns Bernhardt was one of the first members, I think, who started the Bilderberg group or converted the Teutonic Knights membership club into what we now name after the Swiss Hotel meeting in 55, the Bilderberg group. So there's also like a weird connection between the elite and the financing of anime, because at that time anime was like a cheap way to get a media made, and so there's a reason why there's so many weird messages or weird plots that are worked into it, like Tekka Man, Uchino Kishi is all about the world's about to end because of pollution, but we realize that aliens are trying to steal it from us because we don't realize it's not about to end. You know, like these really specific Japanese we can save the world message stories that seem to emerge. Also, there's this.
Need that heat, need that love. Tired of being lonely, tired of feeling cold. Need to put my hot dog in that roll. Everything feels off, something ain't right. Need a little sugar in my bowl tonight. I need to heat things up, make it real. Need that love, is how I feel. Feeling empty, gotta fill that space. Feeling ready, let's pick up the pace. Need a little steam heat on that floor. Maybe I can fix it up, give you more. What's the matter, come through? Come on, let me show you what I can do. Cause I need to drop something in that bowl. Doggone it, let's lose control. I need to put my hot dog in that roll. Make it sizzle, feel that glow. You been acting different, let's make it right. Move that body, we gon' heat the night. Need a little steam heat on the floor. Maybe I can fix it up, make it flow. Get off your knees, let me take the lead. Dark, but I got what you need. Come on and let me drop something in that bowl. Dog playing, let's take control. Hey, yeah. Need that heat, need that love. Drop something in that bowl, no delay.
You're a strange man, Thomas.
Why is Flawed not reacting to that?
I know,
Yeah,
right?
dude.
He will be tomorrow. See, we're always we're always from the future. We're from the future, and so it takes a while for people to catch up. Most of the things we talk about end up being things people talk about later. That's like the way it goes.
I've been asking him to react to goth music for a while.
Yeah,
I actually like full stop. I love goth music.
Well, what do you mean by goth music?
I mean, like, dark synthwave,
Like,
that sort of stuff. Like Sisters of Mercy. I'm a big fan of Drab Majesty.
Okay.
Minute Machine's a good one too.
See, when I think of goth, I think of that song by Mortal Coil, "Like a Kangaroo." Like a kangaroo. Because I feel like also that South Park about the goth. There's just a range, right? So there's proto punk, then there's post garage, and then there's post punk, and then there's proto disco, right? And then there's post disco proto punk, which becomes dark wave, which becomes new wave, which becomes last wave, and in last wave you have all of a sudden like no wave, and then in no wave you've got like the lack of rhythm, like Klaus Nomi. And I feel like Klaus Nomi, well, not quite goth, is like kabuki goth, Yeah. But then you got like the 90s. Sorry, I was gonna get to progressive core with Brackish and Kitty.
Yeah, I was gonna say when everybody's like when they have to sub in goth music, they tend to do like New Order's Level Tear Us Apart. And I'm like, why? That's
Well, no, but that's I think that is fair because it's a new wave.
Yeah.
New wave to goth is a very
They're
quick
interchangeable.
transition. Well, I mean, no, there's definitely like upbeat new wave,
Yeah.
So like I wouldn't say that like Spandau Ballet is goth, although they should be, and that would have been cool,
There's an amazing mashup of that I
Yeah.
love. Are you familiar with Bill McClintock?
Oh, of course, yeah. Bill
Yeah,
McClintock's the best, dude.
he did the one of True and God, what was that song that they had for like the Mummy Return or the Mummy movie? Shit, no, I'm gonna
Godsmack.
yeah, it was the Godsmack song
Oh
from
my god. I wish I
Hang
could
on.
share this with people so badly. This is great. Everybody, you guys need to know
Yeah.
about Bill
Yeah, I
McClintock.
Stand Alone is what it was.
He's a high school. He's a high school teacher, and he mixes two things together often. He'll put like disco and death metal, and like
it's fucking amazing stuff.
it's really good. I'm a big fan of this. I love this music right here. What do you think about music? American Time Machine. You like music?
I do like music. Music's awesome. Do you have a more pointed question, or else is this like open ended?
Yeah, we were talking about things. You could like pick up on thoughts or just go for it. Whatever.
All right. Here goes nothing. Let me see if I can share. Hold on. Share screen. Window.
Oh, are you gonna share? This is the first time you've ever done this. I'm really excited. Oh, you did.
Wait, I don't know if I'm sharing audio too. Hold on.
Oh God, please do. Oh, this is.
I need to share. Make sure I share audio too. No, yeah. Let's see. Also, okay. That selection is on. So, to share audio, share a tab. I'm sorry, everyone.
geek.
If I'm, yeah, yeah, exactly. To share audio, share a tab.
It's okay.
Or
all I got in the
screen
meantime is like
instead.
pedophiles who work for a cartoon.
All right,
network.
well, you can tell me.
Oh, there you go.
Is this playing?
Yeah, you gotta turn it up, but oh yeah. I'm gonna mute myself.
It's supposed to be much more dynamic, but this is my current project.
Can you turn it up?
I think echo cancellation might be killing it.
That could be a thing. Do you have some weird echo cancellation that's killing it? No, that just killed him.
Yeah, maybe. Yep. Yeah. Oh. Am I good now?
I can hear you, but I can't hear your music.
Okay, yeah, I turned it off. So if I have too much echo, I'm sorry. But I don't know. Like, so music, I think is just so like, well, all art is out there and the possibilities are, infinite. Everybody knows that. But it's like, yeah, I guess bringing that infinite possibility like down into a digestible sort of soundscape is like, it's a challenge. It's a challenge for everyone, I guess, and trying to make it something. So right now, like, I guess music's just awesome, but I'm trying to take a more like compositional approach. And I think electronic music is awesome in its own way, but it's like very untapped. So like a lot of the electronic music that you listen to at best, I think a lot of the real interesting stuff will experiment with a lot of rhythmic variations, which I think is awesome, but it's like the noise level is always like level 10. And there's not as much dynamics, I think, as could be. There's not as much dynamic play and not a lot of melodic play, and there's just so much potential there. And so that's what I've been trying to focus on in the past few months. So yeah, it's a deep dive. It's a lot of fun, but yeah, just focusing on one sensory organ in your ears and how you interpret things, it's just a blast. It's a lot of fun. That's all. That's an overview, I guess.
I think it's a medium that people don't focus on enough now with like what makes it so good. Cause I was listening to someone talk about like the Goo Goo Dolls and how like they're playing with time signatures, and also Radiohead, how they play with time signatures like in the middle of their songs a lot of times. And people don't realize how that changes rhythm and helps you like, it like almost changes your mood midway through a song a lot of times. People who are into music, they really understand this, but everyday people, they hear a Billie Eilish song, they're like, wow, she's changing the world. I'm happy now. And it's just, they probably don't understand what it is behind her music. If I don't know much about Billie Eilish, but like some of these groups that really play with music on a deeper level, and who understand the medium, I think it should be talked about more. It's fascinating. It really is.
I feel like there's like music for people and there's music for musicians also.
Yeah.
So that's also a problem. Is like once you become interested in music, you change. And if you look at people that go to like music college and study like jazz music history and everything, then all of a sudden the kind of music they like it's not music they used to like, or that their friends like. Oh, it's like, what happened to you? You like these weird notes that don't even sound like, yeah, but it does a thing. You see what it's doing? You're like,
Yeah.
I think that's true.
Yeah, what's the worst music that you like? Like the worst?
Who?
What's her name? Yoko Ono. Probably. I mean, she's got some interesting stuff with Elvis Costello where they're just like screaming, But I
You're
wouldn't
just
call
saying
it...
this to anger everybody. I know that.
No, I mean,
So,
we have the same birthday, Yoko and I see where she's coming from. Sorry, go ahead, Kurt. Kurt, you were gonna say like, what?
I have this terrible fear of interrupting people, but one thing I wanted to mention is like I really experimented now. I'm experimenting now with basically musical gaslighting, but so you like I'm taking like phrases, like musical phrases, and that's also what I like about electronic is like, well, how much can I push the envelope without actually putting lyrical poetry into this? How is it just like an audible message? How do you play around with that? So with the gaslighting portion, it's like you might take a phrase and then you use that phrase, and then over the next few measures and the next portions of the song, you slowly take out or remove and slightly adjust notes, but do it in almost a non-noticeable way. And then by the end of the track, it's almost a completely different melody entirely. There's a million different ways that you can. There's also some avant-garde stuff thrown in there. FYI.
Remember when Joe Biden shit himself in Rome?
Y'all do remember that, right?
Remember when Joe Biden shit
The memes of the Pope and the gas mask are what I remember most.
And this is his real guitar.
Oh yeah.
The only other thing that I want to add is on top of that, I would do other small things, like I might in the middle of the song, which with live instruments you kind of get this effect anyway, but if you're in the middle of the song, you slightly adjust the tempo to make it maybe a couple beats per minute slower, and you do that in the middle, and you almost get like an extra texture to the song, and you might not notice that the change is going on consciously, but it is definitely happening subconsciously. So I like go back from the beginning and I replay over and over and try to basically I replay the total product like hundreds of times, like while I'm trying to adjust little parts here and there. And so the more I've done that, the more I'm like, this is actually like, an evolving thing, not like in terms of like people are listening to it, but in terms of like, this is like, it's just an idea, I guess. But yeah, sorry, I went on a spiel. But thank you, Andres.
Remember when Joe Biden? It's just it gets in your head,
That song was not a good example. That's just an example of other bullshit.
What do you mean it wasn't a good example? It was a great example.
Well, it is an example of like, I'm a fan of like musical bullshit too. So I think there's something to be said for bullshit. That's just my opinion.
Where's that one war? We're going to war. I don't even know what I'm trying to find. Oh well, we can worry about it another time. Camilla.
Oh yeah.
Oh, look at how cute this guy is, right? Look at that. Look at that beautiful face. All right. Camilla is the key to the peace between our two worlds, according to a Next Generation Star Trek episode. What do you guys think about predictive programming, or is that just a chill?
It sounds like they got a better key than we did.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
Wasn't her name? What doesn't it in like Finnish? Doesn't it mean horrible?
Oh, really? That's funny. I wonder if there's like some reason like they hated like the lotus flower or something like that. I don't know. There is like a whole thing with the day that the episode came out, so with the star who played the Link of the Two Worlds with the day of the election, right? Or something like that. I feel like that's kind of funny. Camilla, the date of birth, November 5th. Oh,
wow. That was okay. That was Famke Jensen. She was Jean Grey in the Fox X-Men movies.
Yeah, which is right back to like the Hellfire Club in the X-Men, which I was thinking of earlier, because Ben Franklin was in the Hellfire Club, Don't give me that. Don't give me that, Thomas. Don't give me that. Like,
I mean,
whatever.
I just can't help but think, but it seems like we've been in decline since we haven't had a Masonic option for president in the last couple of elections, right? I think the pendulum just swung too far on the other side.
You don't think that there's like some cool club that they're both in? Like, I feel like Kamala's got to be in some like British Freemasonry. That
I
accepts
feel like,
women.
well, you could just say fake Freemasonry. It's the same thing. I kind
Oh.
of feel that, yeah, she probably is in some sort of weird co-masonry sort of thing with like a
Oh.
fake police force and everything.
Well, when you're not wrong, you're Scottish right. Let me see. Masonic police force. You guys know the story he's talking about? Kamala Harris aide 2 others arrested for running fake Masonic police department, kidnapping people, putting them in fake police cars with Masonic logos on it,
Wow.
bringing them to private fake police stations with fake police jails with real bars. No, those were real.
It's
Yeah.
interesting how these stories about AIDS fly under the radar. Like, political AIDS, not stories
I
about
was
AIDS.
like, what?
'Cause-
California? Yeah.
yeah, well, because the news came out just a couple hours ago that the Cuomo and Hochul aides were Chinese spies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you guys think about that? I mean,
Not
like,
important though, right? It's not important. Those are not important. Remember, what about Trump? He's got 34 felonies. That's what matters.
I think having your own Chinese assistant that's also a spy is kind of like the ultimate flex in 2024.
Yeah, it's like
politically.
a poodle. It's like a chihuahua.
Right.
It's like it's a benchmark of success.
Yep.
I don't know. Maybe. I feel like the Hellfire Club is something that we should have more respect for because the American libertarian thing comes from dudes meeting and having these wild parties.
Is he
like
choking that
Franklin.
woman? Based.
I mean, dude, bruh,
I don't-
You gotta
It looks
ask
like
the
the woman's
Hellfire
copping a
Club.
feel on the right.
yeah, the one on that drunk dude in the front. Yeah.
This is not AI, if that's what you're asking. I'm just saying, like, this is historical. I just so there clearly were. I remember like there's a movie from the '60s where they show like a kid going out in the woods, and then he goes to the he sees there's like a cave that's on the property, and in the cave is Ben Franklin and all his dad and all his people, but they're like doing this whole weird sex thing where there's like naked women in like 15th century clothing with swords, and this kid's like, "What's happening?" But then of course, he's gonna find out that that's just what they do because they're, that's
You're talking
Relax,
about
it's not
someone's
Ben
great
Franklin,
great
it's just
grandparents
Chris
right now.
Van.
You're trying put it in perspective, Thomas. I don't know. It seems kind of like that, right? I mean, people are definitely having these secret clubs, and isn't that kind of the most American things that you can like go on your own property and like wear a cape and take off your shirt, hold the sword?
Bury the equivalent of like 30 bodies. Yeah.
Is that too apologetics? I don't know. What about there was this game called Concord. I mean, we could explain a bit about how the world's at right now.
Yeah.
This is a metaphor for the fall of civilization, I think. Shagsworth, tell me more.
So PlayStation spent about 8 years developing this game that was supposed to be like their new exclusive, like their IP, their equivalent to Overwatch. And in the matter of about 10 days, this game has been dead. It is now dead. They have announced today that they are closing the multiplayer servers as of Friday and are starting refunds right now. So anyone who bought it is going to get their money back. They haven't said that they're just abandoning it. They said they might do something with it, it seemed, but it just, as you said, it kind of shows you like where we're at.
But for why? Why for does it suck so bad? I don't
know. So I'm one of the few people who actually purchased this game and played it for probably more than 10 minutes. The game is like the character models in this game are probably as cringe as it gets.
And the dialogue.
And the dialogue, I didn't notice the dialogue very much. There's pronouns in the top right corner of the character screens.
I'm sorry.
But like the interesting part is
canceled, just done. They couldn't just remove that. They couldn't just update it to get rid of that part. No.
The game itself, like the characters and what they do, their abilities and stuff are actually kind of cool. I mean, again, it's very similar to how Overwatch works. Like each character has something different that they do, a different kind of role. There are support characters, but they work a little bit different than some of the other games. Like they're doing damage, but they're also like healing is sort of a background thing. But yeah, I don't know what Sony did here, or what they didn't do. I just don't think they marketed it properly. This is their product. This is what we're running with.
You don't feel, I mean, like, because it's supposed to be an enduring thing like Fortnite or Minecraft. Like, they wanted a top 3, and it wasn't going to be that, so they just dropped the whole thing.
As Extra Zero said, I think pre-show was they came out with a $40 price tag.
Yeah.
Okay.
The reveal to the public also was a big problem. So there was marketing for it, but they kind of dropped it. It wasn't really being hyped prior to the PlayStation State of Play, and I believe it was the July State of Play where they really showed it off, and it took up a big portion of the intro of that State of Play, and it had that really dated, we're trying really hard to be Marvel dialogue and all the quips. And it was a well done CG trailer, but it's just like go through these really unappealing designs. And it's like, look, games like Overwatch push the message, but the thing about Overwatch is there's one Roadhog and there's a lot of appealing looking characters. There's kind of something in Overwatch for everybody. And in this game, it just really didn't have it. Every character was kind of uglified and just was unappealing.
Yeah,
and
so the same thing like Star Wars Outlaws, except Outlaws actually is a unfun game to play.
Right. I think.
Are you sure this game is unfun to play, or is it just uglified?
Yeah. Well, I think
for sure.
The game mechanics are fine, but when you have on PlayStation, you can play Apex, you can play Overwatch, you can play it's on the tip of my tongue, but there's a bunch of
Fortnite, Call of Duty.
It doesn't do anything new. Essentially, it does the same things differently, but not like better. Again, which is why, like, why would you charge $40 for something that everyone else is doing free? Mm-hmm. Just make a battle pass with cool skins that people can collect. Make it a collectathon thing. But all these other games came out at a time, like a really perfect timing, where we needed an Overwatch, we needed a Fortnite, we needed that battle royale, and we don't need this hero shooter. And if you are going to put out a hero shooter, like the Marvel one that's coming out, looks pretty
the other
intriguing.
one I was thinking of.
That one looks
that's free.
good. Yeah, and that one's going to be free.
What if they leaned all the way in and you could shoot like puberty blockers at each other, or like?
Well, I mean, given some of the characters, you look like the character doll. I mean, maybe.
I mean, it's pretty bad, dude. Like, I feel like the problem here is actually bigger than people realize, because some people are like, okay, it's just video games, and maybe you don't always play video games or you don't care, but this is like whole departments, hundreds and maybe thousands of video game companies are really like tech teams that are artist teams that are working in multimedia, and they're all being swallowed up. We saw this crazy swallowing go up by like 3 big whales. You got Microsoft, Sony, and who am I leaving out? Who bought a bunch of companies besides Microsoft and Sony? Somebody else. Was it Google? Amazon?
Probably.
Well, Amazon bought up a lot of them too, but
Yeah.
Microsoft's bought up the bulk of them. Sony's got some big acquisitions, and then Amazon's one to look out for, because Amazon just got
the Amazon game. That one also like never
New
came
World.
out or failed.
Yeah.
Or
Amazon still got
but
games. Yeah.
But it's crazy to buy these game companies, because then they're like, we have such high expectations of this game that we can't let it be artistic because that's experimental, and therefore it won't be different, And then when that game comes out, it can't meet the expectations because the expectations were this crazy top 3, not even top 10. Like, so it's just crazy what they're doing. So it destroys. Very quickly, we're watching like the end of game companies. I think they're going to completely take out the industry.
My opinion on this is that that Sony probably intentionally sabotaged this in the most professional way they could do it. They had 8 years of work and salaries paid, and they knew this game was going to fail. I think they saw the writing on the wall. They saw all the DEI stuff not working, and they're like, well, we have this flaming pile of garbage here that I know that no one's really going to buy into, so let's just do what we can. I mean, they offered up, we're not even 2 weeks into the release. They've already issued refunds and they're closing down the server. That's insane to me. That again, I'm sort of taking this from extra zero. If that doesn't say tax write-off, I don't know what does.
I don't think this is coming back. I
Yeah.
think that it's going to be like Disney with Willow, because it's estimated that it's anywhere between $100 to $200 million plus 8 years of development time, and they pulled in Bungie resources to finish the game. It probably had a couple engine changes, because if it was in development for 8 years, it probably started out as a proprietary or a UE3 game, then moved to UE4, then UE5. And, as a pretty avid gamer, I don't really see too many games that are well optimized for Unreal Engine 5. I think Wukong's probably the best we've got so far.
It does look sweet.
Yeah.
It's a cool game. It's very demanding. I think it's this generation's crisis.
But yeah, like it's also a not woke game, and so I think there's something where they're cutting their losses and saying, look, this isn't working, and this is our excuse to go super pendulum swing the other direction, right?
I think we've also kind of fallen into this fallacy of looking at stuff, whether it's woke or non-woke, because then we're also falling into a trap of buying things that we don't necessarily want, but we're buying it to stick it to the man. Whereas it used to be like video games were an escape. And I think where Wukong excels is that it's a retelling of Journey to the West. It's a story that's, transcends generations. I mean, Journey to the West has inspired so many stories. Like Dragon Ball is probably one of the biggest ones that people know and love. Yeah. And they're kind of missing the mark that the way to sell a product to people is to make it appeal to general audiences. That's like where the MCU, I mean, if you go back to 2008, it was like such an anomaly that Iron Man resonated with audiences. You have a C-tier comic book hero, and you have, men, women, children all resonating with this character and finding commonality and things about Tony and Pepper and Rhodey that they all liked. And, it was just, they did all of that while bringing in the story beats, from Iron Man's origin.
Right after like the John, what's it called? The Mars. It's called John Carpenter on Mars.
Yeah, I mean that was a big flop, but it wasn't.
Which is the exact opposite, though, in a lot of ways. Because like, let's try to appeal directly to the audience, and not worry about the extreme fan base, which is like the extreme fan base having an extreme fan base.
It's like Lord of the Rings is a good example too, and now they're retconning orcs, and orcs have families. They're not pod people. You have to like walk that line and respect the source material, but also understand who are the vast majority of consumers. It's okay to have a niche project, a passion project, but don't put hundreds of millions of dollars into it if the audience isn't there. And there's this fallacy of the modern audience. And I do think it's kind of that's why I'm a big Nintendo fan, is, Nintendo makes games for a general audience. And that link that I gave you, I have a theory about what's going on, and I haven't crunched numbers or data, but I think, BlackRock's a common one, but you look at like everything that's going on with Anheuser-Busch, and their shares have like steadily, they sold some of them, but they've steadily increased. And I think that what we're seeing is with this push, because it's not just video games. A lot of people are talking Gamergate 2.0, but it's happening in movies, TV, music. I mean, even medicine, advertisements. And I think a lot of this stuff is just investors that are ultimately trying to devalue institutions and brands so they can get a larger stake in it. I mean, we're talking about BlackRock, a company with $15 trillion in assets. Why do people reject this idea that they're going to stop at 15 trillion, that they wouldn't want to play their hand and say, hey, as investors, we want you to adopt these policies that we know are going to cause you to lose your consumer base, that are going to cause you to hemorrhage money. And,
that way we can buy stocks cheaper.
Right, exactly.
Is it though that this is something I've been wondering for a minute Are we learning this though? These companies, again, I think Sony, they haven't really gone into like very headlong into the DEI stuff. They usually stick to their guns a lot like Nintendo does.
Well, you got to think, where did Sony restructure their headquarters? Santa Monica. They're getting these people an emotional appeal. And,
right,
a lot of these people, it's easy to go to an area like that and find people that are activists first and get them to buy into it. And then the investors are out of touch, the board members are out of touch. So they're like, well, this is what the kids are saying, this is what we're reading on Twitter, and we see how much botting there is. We see how much botting comes out of Disney. And I mean, this stuff happens in the real estate market. Where do people think gentrification happens and comes from? It's the same thing. You devalue a piece of property, then you come in, sweep it up, and make it a booming business. It's not a happy accident. And I think that we're basically seeing what I call digital gentrification. And I probably need to tidy up this theory a little bit, but that's and I hate when you start seeing people like say, oh, sweet baby ink's a problem, but I think they're a symptom. They're not the actual disease. And I wish people, my buddy Cream NATO says, when you're poisoning or when someone's seeing a river being poisoned, you don't just look at the river and yell. You go upstream and find out what's actually poisoning the river. And people want to compartmentalize this stuff. Oh, it's Gamergate too. We got to stop Kim Belair. Well, I think everybody's kind of, realized Sweet Baby Ink's a problem. They've made curator groups. They've, trashed their name. Kathleen Kennedy and Bob Iger. Yeah, they're a problem, but
I think there's another dynamic at play here too. Maybe, I mean, this is my tinfoil hat on, but almost in like a Fabian society kind of way where they slowly enact change now, knowing that it'll benefit them in 2 or 3 generations. The same way, maybe a strained analogy, but like if you've got a business or a bunch of businesses and you start installing ramps on all of them, and then you help get the law passed so that now you have to have a ramp, and now you can go and report everyone that doesn't have a ramp. And like if you had the heads up and you had all the time to get the contractor, and the contractors weren't overbooked, the materials weren't under high demand, and like you set yourself up, in this case DEI being that ramp, and then all of a sudden it's like bam, worldwide DEI is now mandated, and if you don't have it, you can't sell, you get fined. So then they get to be ahead of the curve in this thing that they themselves are putting in the motion.
Anybody King of the Hill fans?
Oh yeah.
So do you remember the episode with the low flow toilets?
It sounds familiar. I couldn't tell you now.
Basically, there's a law that goes into place where every resident in Ireland has to adopt these low flow toilets, and the toilets suck and they actually use up more water. But then it turns out in the end that, again, they appeal to people on environmentalism and, this is saving the town. This is saving the world. This is for our kids. And they come to find out that, the politician that pushed it is the one that, owns the distributing rights for these toilets, the low flow toilets.
Yeah.
And I do think that, there's that kind of element to get people concerned, but I go back to saying it's an emotional appeal. Yeah. And you get people in California that, they act off of emotions rather than logic, I mean, and it's not even just pigeonholing those people. It's, there's that old saying, like, if you don't vote liberal when you're young, then you have, no heart.
Which is cool because that means I'm a heartless, insane person now.
Yeah, I just hope that these companies are, I don't know, white pilling myself when I can, that they're learning their lessons, but with how much money they're losing, and even Hollywood. But I don't know, time also will tell if that's the case. We are seeing some shifts in Hollywood, but.
Well, my silver lining is that if this was a true Hegelian dialectic, then that just means that we're waiting for the pendulum to swing on the other side, like just in time for GTA to come out, like maybe 7 or something. And it'll be like over the top based on, what we're used to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's like something I'm kind of concerned about is like the right wing pendulum. Like that we've got this point where, it used to be chill. In 1999, we were like in this good spot here with like South Park and Muhammad cartoons. And
we need like a Far Cry 5 where like the American cult is the good guys. Like now all of a sudden, like those are the protagonists. That's kind of what I'm hoping for.
You know what I mean? Because like it could easily end up with like pictures of Trump on like every wall and people like forced like even in truck stops. I don't know. I could see it being. It could happen, man. Like we could easily have the Christian right. Like Matt Walsh wants to take away raw milk. Okay.
Sounds this is a reality.
First Matt Walsh came for the communists, and I said nothing because I wasn't a communist, and then he came for the women but what's a woman? But now he's coming for our anime and our raw milk, and you can't trust Matt Walsh, dude.
Doesn't like video games.
Yeah, I don't know.
That sounds like a future where like we get a Duke Nukem remake, like a proper one though.
I feel like the communists who are like, when you have a
We're not that
riot,
lucky.
you have a protest, right? And there's somebody's like, dude, I can't feed my family. Like in Nigeria right now, I have our friends, Ibiza, and they're having the hungry protest, like the worst protest in 40, 50 years in Nigeria. And they're like, what will happen is you've got the Muslims or the communists or the like whatever group will come and say, this is why they're protesting. Give me the microphone. And then they'll talk about it. And then they'll have an argument that these people have no interest in either of these situations. And I think that's what we're going to have happen again here. We'll have a group that takes over for the distressed people, and they'll say, like, this is what's going on. This is what we want to change, right? Christian right. The Christian right will come in, and then they're going to say, we're going to take away.
So you're telling me the Daily Wire is going to make video games, and we're going to get a Duke Nukem parody called Knowles Blows Them.
I hope so. We need that kind of thing.
I'm so sick of that Daily Wire shit. Like, you know, I'm all for people making alternative media. It's great. People should be making alternative media, but you know, the stuff that they've done has been garbage, unfortunately. You know, I know they're trying to do something, but it sucks, man. And everyone just announces, oh, we're anti-woke. And it's like, well, you've already lost me. I don't care about that. I care about good media that's written well. Like, I don't care about anti-woke.
What about a Gina Carano outlaw, though? Wouldn't that have improved it?
I like Gina, but she, like, you know, I know what they were doing. I know that was their own publicity stunt, but Jesus Christ.
To that point, it's just sad that, like, and you know, like I do Gronky on Dogs once a week, and one of the things that attracted me to the show that Lethal puts together is that one of the things that we do is promote good games. You know, we take a time at, you know, at the end of the episode to put a good indie game on a pedestal and talk about it. And for people, there's a lot of alternatives out there with, you know, independent cinema or smaller movies. Like I was a big fan of Sisu last year, and not too many people were talking about that movie. And it's just like, when it comes to alternatives, people want to talk about their own or their friends, but they don't really want to say, hey, I found this. You might not be aware of it. Have a watch, have a listen, you know. And this movie is badass. Practical effects. It's like nonstop action. It doesn't overstay its welcome. It's about 90 minutes long. It's a far better movie, in my opinion, than John Wick 4.
Wow. What is it about?
So basically, there's this Polish miner during the end of World War II, just minding his own business. I think he's Polish, or maybe he's
just minding his own business.
Minding his own business. He finds a big gold vein, and as he's like going in to take it back into town to cash out, he runs into the Nazis, and the Nazis
like
at first they let him go, and then he runs into another band, and they figure out that, you know, hey, he's got a sizable chunk of gold. They know that they're losing. They know that they have nothing to go back to. So they're like, yeah, we're going to get this old man and we're going to take his gold. So, you know, when we go back, we can at least like run away. We don't have to face what we did, because they know what's coming. So they're after him. He's just trying to get away and cash out his gold. And then it's one of those movies. He has a dog. The one spoiler I'll give you is the dog does not die. I know that's like a big
all suspense lost.
That's important to me.
I know there's a lot of people like every time I go to a movie and there's like an action movie, my wife's always like, God.
There's something about Daily Wire, Daily Mail, Daily Caller. They're all kind of Daily Mail, you know. And this that's weird to me, because it's like that
Daily Bugle,
the Orphan musical. Yeah, the Bugle. Like, it's almost like was like Christian Bale, American Psycho, as a child in the Newsies. Oh, it's taken forever. The Newsies, man, because they're like all these dudes. Like, do you know these dudes who work in the journalism and they're Newsies? They're basically Newsies, and they just want to like tell stories. And this is scary to me, because I want to make a show that's like, there's no news today. That should be like the name of the show, because news sucks. All the news is just constantly the ice skating girl who got her legs hurt.
It's tabloid drivel is what it is. It's nothing.
Nancy Kerrigan.
Tanya Hardigan. Yeah.
Okay, because like I was talking to so like I saw the movie. It's not true. All of it's a lie. So basically, what happened was some weird stalker who was trying to molest her, who her mom kept letting around her because she wanted to keep her scared, so she kept ice skating all the time, went and attacked Nancy Kerrigan, and she got blamed for it and could never ice skate again, which is like, just kill her, you know what I mean? Or put her in jail for 20 years or something like that. But like, oh my God, to take like, That's like worse than a car accident, and I mean, just like that you get. And she never did it. It's like Charles Manson. She never murdered anybody. It's just this whole thing. But what was going on, right? What was going on when the Tanya Harding thing happened? Nothing was going on because they just finished Desert Storm, and CNN had this 24-hour, the first 24-hour thing, which was just like, we're gonna have all this coverage all the time. Don't even turn off your TV. It's just gonna keep happening. And people was like September 11th.
Yeah.
Prototypical TV was Desert Storm, and they ran out of Desert Storm.
I
So they're
was in
like,
kindergarten
Nancy
when
Kerrigan.
Desert Storm happened. I remember the news because I
Dude, it's
remember
beautiful.
the
It's
two things. I remember the two things that scared the bejesus out of me is one, talks of World War III. And I was like, I remember saying to my grandparents, "Are you going to go into World War III?" And they're like, "Nah, stop listening to the news." And then Hurricane Andrew was another thing.
Dude.
And they were like,
Honestly,
really.
all you need is like Desert Storm footage and like dark wave, like doomcore. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing. Woo, woo, like it's just terrifying, blood eating. Just the green is just no wave, right? It's just it's right back to the goth.
How much of it do you think that they promoted it just because they thought it was unifying?
All hours of the day, 24-hour coverage, CNN,
Well,
satellite.
I think they learned a lot from Vietnam, where they had way less control over exactly what got shown, and it scared a lot of people around the table.
Yeah.
And they were like, "Oh, I don't want Johnny to go off to war now." And I think that Desert Storm was one of the first times that they had absolute control over exactly what they wanted to see, who got to air it, when it aired. Like, it was meticulously planned, especially since that whole war was kind of over within like 14 minutes of us launching an overnight attack.
We
that
went
was
at
the kind
night.
of lesson.
And why did we go at night? Because it'd never been done at night. No one ever gone into Baghdad at night. It was like a thing, like so.
There's another story from Desert Storm that rocked my world. It was in this book called Aberration in the Heartland of the Real, and it was about Timothy McVeigh. And there's this one particular story that I was able to back up and verify, but that they had this huge battle overnight, and there were all these dead bodies from the battlefield, and the US just brought in bulldozers, and they basically just pushed sand over everyone, all the trenches, all the people. So by the time that the media was there to show up and get any sort of footage, it just looked like a pristine desert
Zen
with
garden
nothing on it. Yeah, it was a complete Zen garden, and that's the kind of level of like they had that type of control. Yeah, sure, bring the cameras, air whatever you want. It's like just show up at about 9 o'clock, and by 7, the thing looked like it was a resort almost.
Yeah, Desert Storm was amazing, and also we had all this amazing equipment. It was the first time GPS was used. First time we had like trucks that could drive themselves. We had automation and things like that we don't think about until even today. We don't have self-driving cars.
And they were using like the retina, like the fighter pilots had the little technology, and in 2001 this was a big deal. Like the little camera that could see where their pupil was looking, so it could automatically aim for them and stuff. Like 20 years, 30 years ago, that was like pretty high tech.
Right.
Yeah, the cruise missile was tested there. That was the first combat test. Was an actual combat.
Yeah, it was like, could we just like what do we got? We have all these new toys. We haven't been able to use them in a few years. Like a lot of these toys have been sitting around for like 10 years. You know what I mean? And then there's all of a sudden new microchip stuff, which was also important because Afghanistan was happening, and like the Soviets were in Afghanistan, and they were way behind us. So we had a lot of this kind of there was a worry that if they weren't keeping up, we wouldn't have a reason to keep accelerating our military. So all sorts of ball-bearing missile fabrication machines and trucks with microchips, GPS systems were essentially just lost, kind of like Afghanistan today with Biden. We're lost to the Soviets, and all of a sudden the Soviets had everything they needed to continue on for another 10 years, right? But the church committee hearings, I think, is always a key one, because while people were worried about Watergate, they did this sort of more quiet church committee that looked at all of the secrets of the government and like figuring out, okay, so how much control over the media do you have? You guys like own the media? And it was the craziest meeting, because you've got people with voice changers and eyes wide shut masks, so you can't tell who they are because they're secret agents right now, so at the time of the meeting they have to like disguise what's going on. And apparently just the amount of coverage is, we don't even know right now, people don't understand. It shows like the Operation Mockingbird, the control of the media, and how they started to set up for after Carter, because as soon as Reagan becomes president, it's just like boom, we can control literally the entire narrative, and we can control the narrative of other countries too, and we'll have optics. And it wasn't until I think it was 2019 they made a law recently that changed that you can't the CIA cannot make these same false psychological optics operations that hit domestic. They can still do them overseas like they've been doing. They can still run like the Filipino news channel, but they have to be careful that it doesn't get broadcast somehow in the United States, right? That can get them in trouble theoretically. So just fake news all the time.
Yep.
What do you think, Kurt? You have a cat. What does your cat think? I can't hear you, but he's muted. He's trying to
I
get
don't think he
cat.
does. He's on mute.
Okay, now, yeah, I forgot I was on mute. Yeah, my cat is just she's antisocial tonight. Yeah, she's
Better antisocial
she's.
than anti-Semitic.
We'll
I
go with
always
that.
say
Yeah.
Cats.
So, my one friend, he was telling me, what if you got up every day, and you told your children, you are the chosen people of God, and everyone else isn't. I don't know. It's like
That does sound like how cats are raised, though. You're right. I get that.
Yeah, that's how I treat my cat. I say you're God's chosen animal. No one else is. Don't let that be nice to everyone, though. Even though you're superior to them. But that's how my cat is doing.
That's fair. What about fake news and control of the media by the CIA and et cetera? How do you feel about that? How does that make you feel, Kurt?
News. Well, that is kind of synchronicity.
Of course, that would be. They're like,
yeah. Yeah. Well, Colin, he brought up a podcast where people were talking about fake news and how that was trending and our media. And I don't know how to approach it from the correct angle, I guess. I have been thinking about this, and I've been thinking about, elections, where things are going. It's hard to... I like to think about things generally, rationally speaking, and in terms of, like, what is our status as an empire? And so... essentially, I think parts of our empire are going to change. We're not going to be the empire that we were. I think people need to realize that. America is going to lose proportional influence in the world. Doesn't mean it has to be a bad thing. That doesn't have to be a bad thing at all. I think most empires, they're built on very sinful actions, and that's how you get a lot of power, and that's how you forcefully atomize society. Is you get a tremendous amount of power and technology, and you spread people out. Say, okay, now you're all just like, go fuck yourselves, whatever. That I'm paraphrasing, but when you look at our society now, it's like I think when people are attached to their phones, one reason people are like attached to their phones and media is because, we've gotten so far removed from the tribal society and actually constantly being connected to people that we're like subconsciously seeking a replacement for that. And so like that's one aspect I don't think people have thought of. I got that thought when I was our friend what's his name? Vincent, he recommended, reading Terrence McKenna, and I browsed his book, and that kind of got the wheels turning. Like, I think there's a connection there. But so, like, as far as like what media, I don't know. I think media has been too much of a pacifier for too long. Like, even with stories like with the whole, JFK assassination, like the JFK assassination could have been seen as the type of pacifier. Like, just keep people preoccupied while we like divert away from like the real behind the scenes problems. Even though, your president getting assassinated is a problem. I don't mean that, but I mean it was definitely a different problem than the way they presented it. Like, just somebody shot him. What an evil guy. Am I right?
I mean, I know, because you got to remember, and I want to recommend in case, because I feel like not everyone's seen the executive action movie that Trumbo made, but we mentioned it a couple times on Synctank. But you guys should see this movie. It's free on YouTube, not this version. Just keep looking for it. You'll find it. It's Trumbo, who was one of the blacklisted 10 when Hollywood was blacklisting people who refused to say if they knew a communist, even if they weren't communists. Trumbo eventually 10 years later makes this movie about what happens if George Herbert Walker Bush decides to take out the Kennedy dynasty. And it's just the entire planning of it, how it would go about, and the creation of a new American dynasty, kind of a Bush dynasty, to replace the Kennedy dynasty, and having come out of the CIA, usurping the United States, and eventually retiring to president himself. Once he's done doing all the things he has to do for vice president and Reagan, etc., he's basically the president's the least important role at this point. It's just the face man, and you can do it when you're retired from your business, right? But what was going on was that at the time of the Kennedy assassination, right before it, he had done all these things with Cuba and the Bay of Pigs, and the CIA was very upset about losing land. These families who were running, who a lot of the time were white, Anglo-Saxon, psychopathic, Connecticut, males. They came from families that owned huge plantations in Cuba, right? Sorry, go ahead, Shagsworth. You have a thought.
No, I was going to say easy blasting Connecticutans like that. All right.
Not all of them. Not all of them. And we know which ones we're talking about, bro.
I know.
One of the good ones.
Yeah. The ones, not the ones that breastfeed. Okay, we're talking about. There's a very specific kind of Connecticut people.
I feel like too. I have to stand up for, or maybe point out the silver lining that if there is going to be fake news in the world, which seems there would be, even if you wanted to believe in ideals, there's going to be fake news in the world. Wouldn't you want our country to be the best at it versus anyone else?
Yeah,
and I'm not even sure
control.
If I would assume that we're in the top 3, but I don't know how our fake news compares to, say, like China's fake news or to Russia's fake news. It does seem that we've got the best people on it. At least we used to.
Well,
like
how long's our
in the
team been
golden
banned?
era? Well, they had like Edward Lansdale on the case, right? Like he was kind of running CIA operations. He was running media operations. He was like a Madison Avenue, Don Draper, Mad Men kind of guy that was also painting the evil eye and convincing villagers that vampires were real. Like that sounds like the guy that I would actually want in charge now, versus we probably have some DEI version of Edward Lansdale. So now we're like falling behind in all the fake news avenues, and no one else is really doing that.
And don't forget, in Vietnam, they legitimately projected ghosts.
Yeah.
Like
they recorded screaming children, which is like
that's wild.
Nothing
Very
new.
Waco of them.
Nothing new and not getting old, I guess. It's something they still do. But also just draining people's bodies upside down with holes in their necks.
As you do.
Out, which just like, because at that point, whether or not they believe in vampires, they know that these people are weird.
Has
like,
this made it to Call of Duty yet?
Well,
I feel like
to go back to the Tanya Harding story, like I really want to look into all that, because it's just crazy to think for 30 something years, I thought like, oh yeah, she hired a guy to do that.
Like I thought that Saddam Hussein put people in wood chippers because I watched Fargo, and because the new plan for a new American century. Basically, the only 2 reasons. Like, if it weren't for a little bit of propaganda in there, and the fact that I'd already seen it portrayed, I feel like that's the thing we do a lot. Like, there's a lot of like Al Capone. Al Capone fed 130,000 people, right? Gaddafi, for the love of God. Gaddafi. Yeah.
And then Gaddafi might not have been the greatest guy, but the irony is everybody celebrates Obama for being, this racial
He's
turning
really
point.
good with drones, though.
Right, and the irony
I have a
is
drone,
the destabilization of Libya created the largest known slave trade in the world in Africa again.
Yeah, which is I just again can't imagine is an accident, considering what Gaddafi was saying about the world, how it had been, and what he was trying to do. Right, but I think also
more importantly, he wanted to continue the gold standard.
Yeah,
well, I was about to say he also
so did
was
Saddam.
He was
did
pushing
JFK.
against that red shield a little bit. That's the Gundam shield.
I feel like Al Capone liked gold too. That's the thing. But
Wasn't it under Nixon that we abandoned the silver certificate?
yeah, it was under Nixon. Yeah, and we'd already done it before Nixon. We'd reissued it under Kennedy. So I forget who did it before Nixon. I feel like it might have been
FDR was the
Eisenhower.
one that actually made it so it was illegal to hold on to your gold at that point. You had to turn it all in for the war.
Yeah, and
Right.
Fort Knox, when I was growing up, was part of the cultural lexicon. Now, when was the last time you ever heard anybody mention Fort Knox?
Right. Well, not really. I know that what I was trying to say earlier about like when people were in Texas right before the assassination happened for Kennedy, that there were signs placed up around. I wish I could find the photos of them in this movie because this is all based on true events. That signs that called Kennedy a traitor, right? And they said treason, like wanted for treason was the sign I'm trying to find. I think it's Kennedy wanted for treason. And it's interesting because like the punishment for treason is in the Constitution is death, right? So the fact that they posted this all around right before his assassination, I find, that's kind of its own minor sync too.
It's written by Dalton Trumbo. Okay. You were saying Trumbo, and I'm like, is he talking about Dalton Trumbo? Because what's that book he wrote? I can't even think of it right now. It was so fucking good, and I can't even think of the name of it at the moment.
Let me see. I haven't read any of his books. Let's see. Book. Eclipse?
No, I'll find it.
I've only seen a couple of his movies. Novels. Eclipse. Johnny Got His Gun.
Johnny Got His Gun. That's the one. You should watch that. It is so good. It's about a war veteran who gets extremely injured in war, and he can still think and all that stuff, but he's completely stuck in bed. He's blind. People are trying to communicate with him. It's really, really good. It's been
Donald Sutherland, right?
Yeah, it's been about 15 years since I read it, but it's one of those I want to go back to because I read it when I was much younger. But I remember just being so moved by it. And actually, Metallica did one of their songs was written for that. So
wow, Johnny Got His Gun free on YouTube.
Yeah, you should watch it. It's good. There's a movie too. Yep. Yeah.
Definitely get that done. Yeah, Trumbo is one of those interesting cases where, Hollywood was getting rid of anyone who's associated, like the Un-American Activities Committee.
Mm-hmm.
And so the Un-American Activities Committee basically put a loudspeaker on people that weren't actually communist, but were kind of like Hollywood people and were, social. And by that, it was like, oh, okay, we better be quiet to the actual communists. And so all of a sudden, a lot of the real communists went underground. But also you had a difference between American socialists and you had the international, because we're talking about Al Capone feeding people when Chicago collapses because FDR is pulling money out of the city and creating this a stable economy to keep people from dying. They're trying to usurp power from these essentially these mafia families have created order in places. And so all of a sudden the American government's coming in and saying, we need to take back control of these cities. We need to take back, even though they're running it. But they've been hired. So the FBI is doing this while the CIA is paying the mafia to orchestrate the Cubans against Fidel Castro. So on one hand, the CIA is paying the mafia. On the other hand, the FBI is interrogating them, and this major, fight starts happening. And that's also where Kennedy starts to have this big, hey, what are the CIA doing?
I got a fun fact to squeeze in here too. That all this started before the FBI even existed. It started during the FBN, which was the precursor to FBI and the DEA and a few other sort of organizations. But the FBN, they actually had George Hunter White as one of their lead officers, and George Hunter White ends up becoming the same guy that does Operation Midnight Climax, the one that was doing the two-way mirror and dosing high people. He was one of the in-betweens of all these different mafiosos and the government for when they were trying to work together against the communists. Yeah, this guy is the absolute linchpin, and I'm shocked that there's not more movies about him in particular. He's kind of two boss levels up from Jack Ruby.
Oh, it's funny you bring this up. I just put a link in the private chat for a book called Chaos. That's the Charles Manson CIA and secret history of the 60s. And they talk at length about MKUltra and how Manson was linked to Jack Ruby. They shared a psychologist, I believe, and how, and also I think it ties in JFK too. There's so much crap. I want to look into Operation Midnight Climax now as a sub project of MKUltra.
Yeah, the big names there. It's there's some they're all heavy hitters, but George Hunter White is one of the big ones. You've got Sidney Gottlieb, who's kind of orchestrating from a puppeteer kind of stance, and then you've got a whole bunch of other guys. William Donovan. There was this group in the military called Donovan's Dreamers. Yeah, this I detail all in this MKUltra comic.com little pamphlet. But Donovan's Dreamers, he was also one of the guys that George Hunter White kind of cut his teeth on, along with this squad of 5 of the OG LSD CIA pioneers in American history. I think Albert Hoffman, or probably have some of the names wrong. But yeah, George Hunter White and William Donovan are the linchpins for all this. If you want to look into it,
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, there's also Tangerine Dream. So if you look
it's not this one. It's not this Albert Hoffman. I can't remember the guy's name.
Oh, okay. Tangerine Dream. What was that book? Not the California Dream. Is that the right one? Orange Sunshine LSD book that talks all about this. So basically, there was a lot of government reverse engineering because Albert Hoffman didn't want to give his LSD synthesis recipe. So they created things like DQ, and they got Shulgin to make DOM, and all of these really extremely strong phenethylamine psychedelics. And they tested them on people at prison, so they would arrest people, and they'd be like, "You can get out for good behavior like right away if you just let us, do a medical experiment, essentially, where you take the substance." And people did it, including Johnny Cash, right, and like some famous musicians as well. So some of these were like really weird, novelty, synthetic substances that were bad for their brains. But I also wanted to look at the ending for Rambo.
Yeah. Oh, funny too. I saw a thing earlier. I didn't bookmark it, but apparently they're doing vaccine trials on prisoners right now. And I did.
Of course. Did they get good behavior off? I mean,
I didn't read it, but you jogged my memory. Now I'm like,
permanently.
Dude.
The name was Alfred Hubbard.
Yeah. In a completely unrelated story, a friend of a friend's son just passed away in his bed at 24 years old. And my hearts go out to their family. And we're not connecting that with anything because it's television. Anyway, Rambo, deleted scene, would have dated horribly because of the Afghani conflict, right?
Yeah, so this is just such an interesting dichotomy to go back to the Cold War. It's like a lot of people, like Rocky IV is my favorite Rocky. It's not the best Rocky, but it's my favorite. It's the most fun. And it's funny because like Rocky kind of ends the Cold War in the end of Rocky IV, if you really think about it.
Yep.
The original ending for Rambo basically would have had Rambo be the linchpin to 9/11.
Yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah. So basically, the way it worked was Rambo makes an agreement. It's like, we're gonna get Vietnam, and you're gonna get Afghanistan. Basically, back like, well, Vietnam comes. You get back to you could have yours back. The Kong get Vietnam back.
He tells the Russians they're gonna have their own Vietnam.
Yeah, and the Russians are gonna have their own like Vietnam issue with these, and we're gonna help the Afghanis like beat you, essentially. Which is also, there's a great movie from Russia, Afghanistan war movie. It's like the Ninth Company or something like that. It is called the Ninth Company. Good job, me. So you can watch this free on YouTube. The Ninth Company, one of the greatest Russian movies from 2005, and they make a lot of good movies actually in Russia.
You ever seen Night Watch?
Night Watch was good, and with Day Watch too, right?
Yeah,
wasn't there too? Yeah,
I'll have to look it up real quick. No,
really good movie.
All right, I'll give it.
And Timur, Bekmenov or whatever, he's really good.
Yeah, you'd love it, Andreas. You like, there's vampires. There's some cool fight scenes. People transforming.
Capitalist vampires, count me in. That sounds like a thing. Ninth Company is basically about how the Russians are like screwing each other over during this war, stealing their own supplies, selling them, and so the kids who are there don't have enough food, so they have to like start selling things themselves and bartering and trading. It's like this weird scarcity war, even though they should have everything they need to fight in the war. And there's like super patriotic because they're good kids who grew up on Soviet propaganda, and then they start meeting like these like jihadists, and the jihadists are like, I mean, they're pretty impressive, right? Like, you gotta admit, that's one thing you could say for them. They're pretty impressive. What do you think about the Iraq Stargate conspiracy?
What? I don't know.
Yeah, enlighten me on this.
Yeah.
Really? Okay. So actually, Oompaville just did like a whole thing on this, and I recommend watching it if you have not heard of this before. It's actually a pretty good deep dive into Ur and Canaan and Meso-Sumerian culture, Mesopotamia, Nebuchadnezzar, all the way up to Saddam Hussein, who claimed to have been floated down in a river on a boat by his mother, kind of like Moses, but also kind of
and
like
the penguin.
Sirius and Cyrus. Yeah, and the penguin. That's true. That's true. But basically, the idea that the war was really about two things. One, there's a Stargate that was discovered in Iraq that Saddam Hussein ended up taking over and was about to use somehow, that we now have control over, that connects us with like ancient pre-civilization, kind of like a linear accelerator that's super old or something from Antiquitech. And the other being that there's like dragons living in the caves in the tunnels in the mountains, and so like these soldiers had to go like deal with the dragons that have come out of the Stargate that like live in the caves, right?
Huh.
And this is basically, as weird as that sounds, what a lot of Iraqis believe actually happened. Like I think most of the Iraqis I've talked to, this is what they think. I mean, except for like a few really normie dudes who like work in the state. These people really think this. Like Iraqis are like, yeah, that makes the most sense. That there are dragons that have come through portals, these weird demon things that have been protected. They're like destroying everything, and they're gonna eventually like rise up and come out, and they'll get the whole world. So the U.S. government had to come after that, and that Saddam Hussein had a Stargate.
Huh.
What? This is where my mind goes immediately.
Okay, let's go there.
Okay. First, I'll say I don't believe it because we would have some other knowledge of it. We'd have some other evidence of it, right? Like I want to believe that this thing exists. It sounds rad.
What other evidence would we have of it if it exists? Like, what do you mean? Like, what kind of evidence?
Well, like I don't know. I feel like this would be such a big thing. Like, what is the purpose of hiding it? Like, again, like, and what is the purpose of hiding like aliens, right? Like that's
Well,
these are the things.
I've heard some compelling theories on why, and it goes into world religion, and you know, there's several schools of thoughts, but the biggest one is that if aliens were to come to Earth, they would need a one world government. They would need globalism. They would need to see, a lack of religion in order for us to. Again, I don't necessarily personally believe this. Yeah, but I mean, for us to be unified.
I think insectoids would be like, these guys have a lot of like, their hive is like not hiving. We need more uniformity, right?
Right. Because it makes sense for people that talk about it. They say, in ancient times when they're humans were less capable and they were segmented off, there wasn't such a thing as global conflict. There was just territorial conflict. It made more sense for them to communicate with us, whereas now it would shatter religion. And there's theories about like why China's made the government the religion of the people. They're ready for it, and that's where a lot of this push comes from. Same thing with like the removing gender norms and whatnot. Again, those are just theories, and those are things I've heard espoused from others. But I think that's why if aliens were to come and they had a completely different culture and they were viewed as enlightened beings, and we are very much steeped in culture and tradition.
Quarantine makes sense to me. Like, imagine aliens were coming. They're like, all right, everybody cover your mask and stand 6 feet away from everybody because you smell. You human stench. We don't want any of that to get on our alien tourists. I could see that being a thing. But also possession, right? Because this idea that aliens are just like super, super duper far away in like outer space or something like that just seems like, we talk about quantum entanglement. It's really, you're just talking about beings. So that's maybe like demons that are intradimensional is just as good as extra dimensional. They could be right here, that we're at a radio station frequency quantum entanglement, that we're experiencing them, and then they're just able to possess our bodies or something more if we're more open.
I don't think it's the same. I don't think it's nearly as cool. The extra dimensional entities that were here all along. That's kind of like your mom saying we've got them at home, like we've got aliens at home. Like, I think there's something way cooler and better about them, because if there's something way out there, then it still leaves the possibility that in another dimension they're here and they're also way out there. But being way out there also means space isn't fake and gay, which is kind of a big thing. No?
Yeah, right. I mean, what do you think?
Well, there's also they could also be subaquatic too. What we see, a lot of these craft come out of the water. 80%
like aliens for sure.
Well, octopi and squids are there's a theory that they are not terrestrial, that they came from space.
But if you were gonna be so if you were gonna body leap, if you're already an advanced enough civilization, yeah, panspermia. But if you're gonna body leap, you're probably gonna use photonic data transmission, like light being or something like that. So at the point that you can create any body for yourself, then you could just transmit yourself through a Mountain Dew.
I'm taking the Dr. Manhattan route for that.
Yeah.
So spores were fired from light years away and they scattered across the planet, and that's what led to our brain developing as a species, and we're the product of aliens. I don't know if I believe that, but I'm
the great sneeze, as Douglas Adams said. Yeah.
Exactly. No, the real problem, I don't think people realize, it's if there is intelligent life out there that is really, really far advanced, which you'd have to really theorize about how old the universe itself is, could be infinite. Who knows? And if there's a really, really far advanced civilization, they already know that we exist. But there's also the other aspect of like things do get like parabolically harder to communicate with and reach the farther they are the way. Like, well, the basically, like, if we try to get to Mars, yeah, we have to think about, well, for us, we have to think about getting to Mars and probably getting on the way back, because the prospect of actually, you know, terraforming Mars and having a livable environment there is a really freaking tall order. We like, that's not something that might be even possible. We don't even know if that idea is even theoretically possible, because, you know, you'd have to have
Isn't
so
it a
many
2-year round trip? Like, because like once you get there, you have to wait for orbit to come
Felt
back.
longer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you have to wait like 20 years or whatever for the cycle. And to me, again, with the whole like this, to me says something about the time space. Like, there's more to it than just the orbitals the way we're described them. That you could just, there's moments when things are closer together.
Well, but also there's, I mean, it's possible. I mean, the time scale that the universe operates on is not something the human brain can wrap its head. Like, we can't wrap our hand around this sort of time scale. So this is where I have trouble, because I'm just my brain just doesn't work properly apparently. But I just think that we might not ever come across this thing. Like, we might come across aliens in the future. We will never know, or maybe they're long dead. But I can't even. I don't know.
Well,
Time dilation
American
makes sense
Time
to me.
Machine.
Yeah.
American Time Machine mentioned something that I think I really, really have kind of bought into, and you guys can maybe tell me how stupid this is. And I think it came from Paul Stamets, and he has this theory that
It's not stupid.
mushrooms are like the smartest thing on the planet. They're this alien species, and
Fungus,
that
yeah.
we mycelium network that's like global, and that like a mycelium network, if there was any form of consciousness at scale, then it would have this retrospective that you're talking about. It would be able to think back thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years. And the most compelling aspect of this is that we ourselves are just a tool that was created by mycelium, because us being able, if you believe in space, us being able to go to another planet and ... carry some spores with us on accident, like, we are the best chance that mycelium could keep spreading throughout the universe. So we ourselves, like, we got huge egos and like, oh, we must be the most advanced things, and maybe God's out there. Maybe God was just a mushroom the entire time, and like we were just here to help spread like the message of God in a literal sense.
Have you seen the show Scavenger's Reign?
I've never heard of that before. Scavenger's Reign.
Yeah, it's on HBO Max and Netflix, I think, still. You can definitely see it on Max. It's I think it plays with this idea, and it's something, without spoiling it, it does sort of play into this this fungus idea, like psyllium spores. Now this, you're seeing images of like the crash land on this planet that is really hostile, and they're fighting for their lives to get back to their ship in order to take off.
Nice.
But one of the things that you see in here is this robot like has this sort of like symbiotic relationship with this fungus that's on the planet, and it starts manipulating it in and allowing it to become a little bit more like human in a way. Yeah, that's the robot right there. It's such a good show. There's, I think, 12 episodes. They're about 25 minutes long each. You could watch it in a day. It's so good.
I
Definitely
like
check it out.
anything about fungus, you know, like Nausicaa. That whole plot is that after like nuclear radiation, there's mushrooms, and they think the mushrooms, it's so far long ago, and they think the mushrooms are poisonous, but really the mushrooms are just processing all of the radiation, because they're able to, like, instead of using photo
synthesis.
Thank you. I was like, photovoltaics, the wrong word.
I was gonna say.
Photosynthesis. Yeah, but photosynthesis isn't the issue anymore. They're using radiation from the nuclear fallout, and all of the people are living in this post-apocalyptic world. You see Nausicaa? You know what I'm talking about? You know that one? Nausicaa's like what?
I'm aware of it, but I've never watched it.
Nausicaa's like, again, Bilderberg Group cartoon, and it's where Pokemon come from. Like Pokemon characters, like Pikachu, is I'm trying to find the picture of it. You can see like a Raichu Pikachu prototypical character, pocket monster in her pocket all over this movie. And there's always mutants and things like that, and they're living in like a plague era.
Oh,
But
Hayao Miyazaki. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty great. Miyazaki, but also Bilderberg, because it's Prince Bernhard financed it. He wanted this made at the time, and it's a Universal that was released like all over the world, and a lot of it's like a Fraggle Rock, like it's designed to end all wars kind of thing. You know that story, Jim Henson? They're like, "What do you want to do after that?" And he's like, "I want to end all wars," and so he creates Fraggle Rock. That's basically how that went down.
Fraggle Rock's awesome, highly underrated.
The Kardashev scale, because you're talking about like world power levels, type 1 civilization's ability to access all energy available on the planet and to store it for consumption. So you can think of it like you could not worry about earthquakes and volcanoes destroying you anymore because you'd be getting all of the energy from those things all the time, right? And that's like the beginning. And then type 2 can take energy directly from its star, which maybe is what we do with photovoltaics to an extent, but it's not really the same thing unless we're like encircling the star. Maybe that's what's happening. And type 3 is the ability to capture all energy emitted by its galaxy, even black holes.
Damn.
Have you heard of the concept of using the sun as a telescope?
No, that sounds cool.
Yeah. So when I first saw it, I was like, what the hell? How would you do that? And I've been kind of binging a lot of valuetainment lately, and there was an astrophysicist on there. I'm struggling to remember the guy's name. I'll get it for you in just a second because it's on my subs. David Kipping, and he was talking about how you could use the sun as a telescope because, well, the sun has a strong gravitational pull, and all that's kind of all a lens does is bends light, but gravity can also bend light, and they realized this during the placement of stars during a solar eclipse. I'm kind of paraphrasing it a little bit. But you can actually go and find the focal point, and they believe the focal point somewhere out near Pluto, and you'll actually be able to create the most powerful telescope available by using the sun's ability to bend light. And going back to space travel too, it's just interesting. I've listened to various podcasts and interviews with Bob Lazar over the years, and Element 115, which we now have, is Moscovium, and Lazar claiming that he discovered that, or his team discovered that gravity was actually a wave before it was declared a wave. And just the ability to mess with gravity for travel, and it's just interesting to think that there could be an element out there that has the property to manipulate gravity, and what we could do as a society and what we could do to enhance just anything really by manipulating gravity.
Do you know about Ninovium?
No.
So there's this guy named Viktor Ninov who is known for the discovery of elements 110 statium, 111 roentgenium, and 112 copernicium, or Copernicium, because Copernicus, whatever you want to do. But he also claimed, while everyone was out for Burning Man one year, that he discovered element 116 and 118, and he named it Ninovium, and it's not real. Basically, he lied about it. He convinced a bunch of people that 118 was like this way, and for several years, all these labs believed it because he was at Berkeley, and people in Iceland, in Russia, and Japan were all trying to resynthesize it and couldn't.
Is this like the salamander letter?
Yeah, basically. Complete forgery. And so, I mean, he was like, look, if we just keep trying, we're going to get there. You know what I mean? And I want to have it. So I'm going to be the one to do it. Like, because I feel like that's what happened before. These other guys got there first. I did the work. I should get to name this one. And we'll just figure it out when we get there. But, like, he didn't get there before he named it and said he discovered it. He just said he did and had fake work. And so a bunch of people built their whole PhDs on this for like 10 years until eventually they're like, no, this is completely fake. It can't be done. And we have a different synthesis method now that works. And they're like, well, your method looks completely different. And it doesn't make sense that his would work and yours would work. So we're going to assume his works and yours doesn't work. So Ninovium continued to be believed for a few years, even though these people, they're like, but dude, I know what I'm talking about. They're like, yeah, sorry, wrong one. They're like, yeah, but like, dude, you're from Iceland, like, or you're from, you know what I mean? Like, you're not from Berkeley. So how could you be right? And it's just interesting to me how science can be based on presuppositions that are lies to further the careers of these guys for years, right? That can happen. What's up, BBDC? Yeah, watch Nausicaa. He's not wrong.
I want like, so back to the Stargate in Iraq. Like, is this something that is essentially functional, or they just found the Stargate and are hoping to reverse engineer to access, you know, whatever power it might hold, or, you know, again, so
Yeah,
it's
what does
either a
Newsweek say
Stargate
about it, right?
or dragons are there. Like,
I think it's both. So I
Oh,
think
this
it's
is-
the idea, yeah. So it's that the Stargate has been used, and we know we've seen movies, and they make those shows in Canada about Stargates. So I assume it's got to be some, like, those shows are probably some sort of predictive programming about how people use Stargates. But there's probably some danger to it, and like it has to be turned on, or it has to be used at certain times, or, you know, this would be like complete lore at that point. Just that there's also a history of Stargates at the Great Ziggurat, and like History Channel does it too. So I can see why this could be something that, I mean, occultists who go to Bohemian Grove would believe in, right? Whether or not it's real or not. But maybe it is. Maybe there's something to this idea that on a hill under the stars made out of quartz rock, you can create four corners. I don't know. What do you think about that, Thomas?
I mean, I
Hiram
actually
Biff?
have an entire comic series about this exact premise called Secret Mystery School, where they go to this exact location and it has a literal dimensional portal that they use to connect with the Ascended Masters. It's the entire premise of this 4-series comic.
All right, so you have a bias, but
I do have a bias, yes.
so all right, but what do you think then? Do you think that there's like some reasonable, like, what do you think a Stargate would be? Is it like something that goes between worlds? Is it something that controls space time or the arrangement of this moment? Like, what do you think a Stargate's for?
You know, like in Harry Potter, where they've got the wall that if you know how to approach it at just the right angle, you can like slip through and go to Hogwarts. I
Mhm.
kind of think that it's something like that, like in a serious way, not in like a oh silly or oversimplifying it, but it might just be like if you can, and I don't think you can just like physically sidestep through it, but if you know how to just walk through the damn door, it's no more difficult. You know what I mean? But right now, it would almost be like teaching an ant how to open a door.
Yeah.
I
I mean,
trying
Don't
to-
you throw Crowley at me?
it's one of those things where we say interdimensional, but
knew
does
it.
anybody really put thought into like what another dimension is? Is it something
Yeah,
that exists on a
so
subatomic
it's-
level, or
It's
is it
not actually a
macro?
dimension. It's not a dimension, right? So that's the thing. Like the word dimension we misuse. Like the idea of multiple dimensions. You've got the idea of the 10 dimensions, which is realities within or parallel realities existing after four. Like, fourth dimension is all the first stacked 3 dimensions in one arrangement and connected to themselves rearranged in another arrangement, right? So that's what we're calling time. But there's different potential arrangements of those things, and there's all potential arrangements, and then there's different things that could be arranged, and there's all potentials of those arrangements. So there's stacked awarenesses, right? But that's different than maybe time. So Dr. Arkani Hamed Nima does this work where he's one of the guys who is the leading quantum physicist. He helped what do you call it, like where you predict. He predicted the Higgs boson particle, subatomic particles, and a number of other things, like maybe 15 years ago, almost 25 maybe years ago, he started doing this. And then they'll do these giant expensive tests in CERN, and they'll prove he's right often. And one of the things he's been saying is that time isn't really real. Time is just, like we said, the arrangement of things. And so we can rearrange things back that way. So you can imagine a room that's dirty and a room that's clean, and then you could make it dirty again, make it clean again. And these are non-causal, non-linear time arrangements, because it could be at any point in history. If you go outside that room, that doesn't really have to have any effect on what's going on outside of that moment.
It's one of my favorite parts of Watchmen is just when Dr. Manhattan's trying to explain, not the movie, but the book, when he's trying to explain how he perceives time and how time's a fallacy, and that the way he perceives times is everything has just already happened.
Right, and are happening simultaneously. So if you believe in the universe and like stars and stuff, then the idea that this is a probability of arrangement because you have so many particles that out of energy become relationship and composited into molecules, etc., that you are just this voyeuristic cucking of reality that's just being pushed forward. But that means if this is probable, then look at the Drake equation, because earlier we talked about the Kardashev scale. The probability of other star systems that we're looking at having the same thing happen before us means that they either work or they don't work. So this level of symmetry should be expected somewhere else, right? So we should imagine that it's very probable that not just in another dimension, but even in just space, as we're calling it, there are other worlds that are almost identical to this one. Maybe even having the same logical progression of people fighting or arguing or loving or wars or whatever, religious, and TV shows, maybe even really similar things like that. And they're just at a different time based on when light is causing this to happen, right? Because all we're calling time is the radiation is causing molecules to rearrange, right?
And consciousness is just the weirdest phenomenon, because it's just, you wonder what happens. It's like one of those things that keeps me up, because I wonder, like, are we just nothing more than a pattern, a pattern of energy, and that's what makes us us, and that pattern can exist elsewhere. And then, well, what happens? Energy can't be created or destroyed. So is there potential that one day we recombine to what we are? The universe is infinite, and in an infinite universe, there's infinite possibilities. Is there a chance that the same,
look how excited you're making Paranoid American Time Machine right now.
I'm so excited. Now I think but your brain is like a parasite to your mind. Like, it very literally, it's like your brain is like this own separate thing that is trying to just leech off of your thoughts and just survive. But one quote, I think it was actually from Valis. That was the book Xirtus sent me like 2 years ago. But a quote in it is, I am a timeless spirit attached to the body of a dying animal. So, which is, I think it's a great quote, but I think it was a quote of a quote and then a whole other thing. But my thoughts on this are essentially, it very much overlaps with a lot of Buddhist thought, is essentially that you are an incarnation of God himself, and you are God communicating with himself. Like, each one of us can be seen as a node of God, and it's just like, part of that expression is you just like making those connections to other things and other living beings of that whole expressive thing, which is really cool to think about. And I think the people that would deny that, like, they're like, oh, well, how does suffering play into that? And I think that's really just like, we have a lot of problems with that in our, Judeo-Christian society, is like, well, we don't talk as much about the philosophy of suffering. But like, in the grander context, if you're able to wake up out of that suffering, then you're like, wow, this is incredible that we can look at all of this and see it this way. So I think this also ties into our, fungal discussions as well. Because, like, what if it is just like all aliens, just communicating with one side of the universe to the other? I think it's a really cool concept, but like, we don't have to. I think the fact that we believe in our own agency, like, gives rise and creates our own agency to a degree. And so we can view ourselves as being like trapped on this planet, but I think that's just a very narrow view. I think, if you evaluate your sensory perceptions and how you can have a moment of peace and how you can have a moment of clarity, is like, once you strip away all those like baser instincts, it's like, I don't know, the feeling there, I think it's really, I don't think you can quite define it as a feeling. If you want to be a materialist about it, like, you can draw your own conclusions, but like, I do think there's really something awesome about being human and about getting to that level of like cognitive capacity where you can see, that inflection point. And like, now you have that infinite ability to self-reflect. Well, it seems infinite. Maybe it's not infinite, but it's certainly like pretty pronounced, that big brain that we have is a big supercomputer that can actually do that thing. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
I like that though. Also, the idea of intelligence is. Sorry, you said you're looking. You're about to say something.
Well, yeah. So I've heard. I can't remember what documentary it was, but it was an alien documentary with somebody interviewing the alien at Area 51, J-Rod. If you've ever heard those stories, they're actually interesting, whether they're believable or not. But asking him about the concepts of religion and his response.
In like 100 years, kids aren't going to know the difference between J-Rod and an undocumented worker.
Basically,
you know what I mean?
Not.
Like, people are just going to be like.
Creepiest thing about those accounts were that he didn't speak in his own voice. Whoever, if I were to speak to him, he would speak back in my voice, and if you were to speak to him, he'd speak back in your voice. But asked about the concept of religion, the interviewer was told, well, we're all part of a collective consciousness, and essentially, we are the universe, and the existence is just a filter. It's our ability to experience independence. And then basically when we die, we rejoin. Think of it as a droplet of water rejoining the ocean. And eventually, water will evaporate and form individual droplets. But life is our ability to exit that noise and experience individuality and not necessarily clarity, but a more quieter existence than being the universe.
Well, go ahead. So it's a very Rosicrucian approach, and I guess to dignify my previous answer about the Hogwarts slip through, but that also is kind of based on this concept of Rosicrucian thought, where like you're all this big ball of consciousness, and then as you get closer to like a planet, for example, it'll just make that consciousness dense and it surrounds it. And one of the descriptions is like putting on a bunch of gloves. Like as you get closer and closer to the material realm, you keep putting gloves and gloves and gloves on to the point where you can barely feel anything. And you're kind of like this complete individual thing, but you're just stuck in this little glove. But then the interdimensional woo-woo stuff, that's described as like desire forms and thought forms. So like first, like a certain concept will exist outside of anyone's like consciousness, I guess, at least here, like where it's all dense. And then slowly, like it wants to be discovered. And then once somebody else wants to discover it, then all of a sudden it starts to come into being. And that kind of is this concept of interdimensional travel, because the dimension is just a measurement that you can make of something. We've got the three, sometimes fourth dimension is time, just because people like to measure the time to record like a delta between different states of something. But you can really, if you have this concept of like, okay, how far along is this particular concept in its evolution from being like a desire to a thought form to a manifested form, that in itself is a dimension, right?
Yeah. Well, another purpose of Stargates too could be just fast travel.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, is that this idea that moments and arrangements are probably causal in ways we can't predict, where you could take an entire reality, atomic bomb it, and then everything would arrange back because of the way you do it, kind of like 1957 in Russia if you wanted to. And you could probably do this safely to something in a vacuum, instead of doing it to yourself. You could probably get the same materials and duplicate a moment that way and set off the same mousetrap. Because what is a moment? It's like a bunch of mousetraps on the floor. You throw a ping pong ball, big bang, causation, right? So just do that and cause the same causation to happen that would have happened from the range of probabilities of another moment.
So we're saying that like you could essentially have a Stargate from here to, say 15 million light years away. And even if that area of the universe or had collapsed, or like a star had collapsed and blown that whole thing away, it would still be able to rearrange that to meet our needs. So like we're linking, you know what I mean? Like, so when we look out in the stars, wherever's out there is likely dead and gone. But if we had a link to that point in space-time, it would essentially rematerialize all of that so we could experience it, because it's what we're seeing. Is that what I'm gathering from this?
So Michael Talbot's book, Holographic Universe, would sort of postulate that the universe is flat and that there's a sort of space-time foam that's being projected that we're experiencing. So when you look up, you're seeing the floor projected above you, and you're just this giant quantum tangled. We could all be in a black hole kind of a thing, right? But from that, everything that we're experiencing could be densely packed in one space, and we're seeing it as this broad, wide, projected holographic reality that is space and time, because these moments we can see the changes even in ourselves, right? We might not be hold on, let me see the 10 dimensions explained. There's a video at some point in your lives, watch this, and you might have already seen it, the 10 dimensions explained long ago. And he kind of this idea that it might look like the aurora borealis to have your body, to see like the slices of a balloon, right? To see the slices of reality. So we're seeing moments kind of like this, like the slices of reality. But I think, yeah, there's something to, we could probably build a reality that was, I mean, with the holographic reality, it's that everything is the same material itself, and you're experiencing it in different ways. So we're like, oh, this is that, or this is now. But really, it's all of these varieties or frequencies of the same material that are arranged in different ways. So it's not that there's distance, and it's not even that these things that are so distant have died. I mean, it's true though, because it's like a metaphor, because what you're looking at is the time difference, how long it takes you to see something that's going on right now, right? But that's kind of the idea. When you look at a star, you're saying this is going on, but it's taking so long for me to see it that it's no longer happening. Like that paradoxical logic, that is what a universal, a holographic universe is. So we're tied to every single moment, right? And we think of it as, to get to that next moment, I have to do this. And we've taught material causation. Like I have to kill the chicken to eat chicken or something. But there might be other ways to get there. There might be other ways to arrange everything together.
Heck yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, like,
So I put this here because there's also the fallacy of Stargates. Like one of my favorite episodes of the Outer Limits reboot. I love the Outer Limits reboot. This episode was based on a short story by James Patrick Kelly, and it's called Think Like a Dinosaur. And basically this reptilian species shares their knowledge of teleportation with humans. Yeah, I mean, yeah, you gotta forgive it for its time. But
I'm a fan of that.
The fallacy is the trial goes wrong. And funny enough, when I pulled this up, I forgot that the woman's name was Kamala, which is also weird. We got two sci-fi stories with
Welcome
Kamalas.
to Synctank.
Yeah. So essentially, what happens is they teleport Kamala to, I believe, Mars, and she shows up on Mars, but the one on the research facility is still there. And they come to find out that all it does is it transmits everything about you, your brain patterns, everything, and rebuilds a version of you in point B. It's like that old Star Trek teleportation fallacy. Like, are you really being teleported, or are you being killed and rebuilt somewhere else? And it makes you wonder, like, could that be what what a Stargate is? How would you use the energy? Well, if the energy is just to recompile carbon and electrons in a single place, and you transmit the data to a distant place, through relays, almost like, think about it like fast travel in a video game. And then you're rebuilt, and you don't know that you're dead and gone, because the one that's rebuilt in point B has no recollection of any of this. It knows no different. Could a Stargate just be that? You think you're walking through it, or you think you're putting an object through it, and really it's just being recompiled elsewhere, and it's not the original object.
All right, respond to both of those things, Kurt. Oh, no, Thomas, you can first.
When you started talking about Kamala and Mars, I was like, I could have sworn that this was the plot of a book called Space Relations that was by Donald Barr, who was William Barr's dad, right?
Dude, I love the idea that, like, the captain is like, I don't want to become I'm an NPC. You know what I mean? Like, that's really comes back out, and it's just the version of him that's a non-playing character. That's sad. He's so sad. He knows it's going to happen. Kurt, sorry, you were going to respond to both things. You could make your own realities and.
Okay. Yes. So yeah. Well, part of I wasn't going to talk much about the Terence McKenna book, but part of what he says essentially is that the way we think about language is that, well, language can almost be seen as a creation of our reality. And so, yeah, there's some pretty interesting things he says about language. He talks a lot about substances, other types of substances. I didn't bother to read all of that because other parts were more stimulating for me. But as far as like the creation of our reality, the creation of reality and seeing, time as illusory, and like I think I am definitely on the side of people being psychic or having psychic capabilities. And so, but I think it's also, there's a causal aspect to believing in synchronicities, like discovering what synchronicities are and also seeing them in the real world. It's not just confirmation bias. I don't think it's just confirmation bias. I can't prove this through the scientific method, but I think the scientific method is a little bit overrated because, we're in a post-enlightenment, postmodern world.
Yeah,
but
also, like, do you mean the Aristotelian method, the Socratic method, or the Baconian method? Like, come on, bro. Like, what are we talking about in science?
Yeah, well, take your pick. But you'd have to unpack that. I can't even tell you. I'm not that intelligent, Andreas. But so when it comes to the moment and thinking that your actions have a causal effect on things that happen, there is a degree to where that's true. But also, like, I think the more you are able to meditate and the more you're actually able to see the world just sit back and observe. And I think this is where religion comes in, because I think a lot of religions out there teach you to just observe things. I think the more you realize that there is a symbiotic relationship between an action and its effect. It's like the effect wants the input from the person or the object. And I think the more you actually meditate, slow down, and get away from primarily the Western mode of thinking, I think the more you realize how awesome that is. But B, it's like I think that also enhances your human connections with other people, because like you do need to be proactive in your relationships to a degree, but I think the way you really invite people into your life is by listening to them. And so like when you get to that listening mode of people, it brings in so many awesome people, and I think it alleviates so much about how our culture is stressed in a way. But yeah, it really is amazing, how much your relationships change once you take the input method, I guess. Like you try to be the receptacle to like what their energy is, and all of a sudden you're not inputting, you're importing, I guess that's a way to put it. But
oh man, can you do a 3-day class for people? Because I could get money out of that. The Baconian method emphasizes empirical observation, inductive reasoning, gathering data through experiments to form general conclusions. The Aristotelian method relies on deductive reasoning from established principles, often derived from logical analysis rather than experimentation. The Socratic method involves critical questioning to expose assumptions and clarify concepts leading to knowledge through dialogue and reflection rather than empirical or deductive processes.
Well, I think universities have definitely been really heavy on the Baconian method, which is it's extremely limiting.
See, I was like kind of turning it around. I was gonna be like, see, what we need are just like kind of general conclusions that we don't have to believe in. But you're right. What ends up happening is they take the general conclusions and they're like, well, just believe in them. So yeah, it's kind of a danger. You're right.
Yeah. Oh, and with the whole like Stargate thing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, with the Stargate thing, it's just that's a cool thing to think about. It's like, what if you could bring yourself back to life after just like putting yourself in a vat of acid?
Would it be like, you?
Oh, just
the big question.
Yeah, well, I mean, how much do you believe in mind-body separation? I guess. I think I'm on the the side of mind-body separation.
I believe in it quite a bit, because I used to listen to Penn Jillette, and when Penn became a vegan, he talked about it a bit, because he talked about like how bacteria in your gut will tell you what to eat. And I found that's very true when I moved over to the opposite of veganism and I became a carnivore and I did the carnivore diet. It's the weirdest thing where my body will very vocally tell my mind what it wants. It's not a craving. It is like, you need this, you need eggs today. And I probably sound like a crazy person saying it, but it's like you need eggs
Dude.
today, you need vitamins, you need organ meat, you need, today's a grass-fed beef day.
And if you
And
want to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs.
you do. You break several.
America.
It's funny someone put it in the chat because I was just thinking this. People like the lack of control over your mind is, I think, what people are suffering from nowadays, because once you learn to, like, I like going to the gym now. I've gotten myself into a place where I physically feel much better, and I can control my eating habits for the most part. I can go to the gym. I feel good. I'm not the biggest person, but I'm the smallest, meekest person. But I have control, and I know when my body needs certain things, like you were saying, extra zero. And I think people's lack of that, or even knowing that they need to go outside, as us gamers say, touch grass,
Get sun.
I mean, like, there's so much. And it's actually taken me out of a lot of my content recently. And people are like, where you been? Like, what are you doing? Why aren't you making videos? Why aren't you doing live streams? It's like, because I'm enjoying what, like, my body is asking of me. It's like, go outside and get some sun and run around with the kids and go for a bike ride. Like, I don't know. It's so, like, life is so temporal. Like, we don't have a lot of time here, and that you just got to utilize it when you can. Because I know eventually that's going to, be gone. And especially with kids, like, I don't know how many of you guys have kids, but like you're sharing that, and you hope that you last long enough to see them have kids and experience that and help them along the way. It's crazy.
Well, the devil's advocate, it's not like you can play video games while you're dead either.
Very true. Very true.
Right. So you still got to get as much of that in as you can.
It's a balance. You're doing the thing,
Bro.
Okay,
All right.
Sorry,
What?
I went on a big rant. Can I say one more thing?
Yeah.
I didn't mean to, but like it was like I didn't know where my brain was going. But like, to connect to this, I think the real area that shows evidence between like things not necessarily being always causal, I think, is the subconscious. And the more you tap into the subconscious, the more that's when you really get a lot better at seeing the true nature of reality. And so the example I use, just like my personal anecdote, is like this month I had a dream, and the dream world is awesome. People have dreams, and sometimes they're awesome, sometimes they do other things. I dreamt that I was seeing a person that I had not seen in a year. It's one of the first dreams that I remembered in like a month. Sometimes you remember your dreams, sometimes you don't. I had a dream of seeing this person, and later that day I actually did see that person. It was a one-time event that I saw that person in over a year. What is the ultimate meaning of that? I think that's a different subject. But I think, once you see little things like that, and you keep a dream journal, for example, you realize, like, oh crap, like, I think our subconsciouses are connected on this big complex web, and maybe we shouldn't figure it out, but I think it's definitely there. So sorry, that was my springboard into that, not to take away from what is a great conversation otherwise. Thank you.